ontology comes first. Ontology must come first. Our actions and even our very selves are shaped by the ontology which we intentionally and unintentionally prescribe to, especially in the context of the issue of modernality, the foundation of all thought, political, philosophical, and technological are shaped by ontology. Campbell and Shapiro, 96. The relevance of ontology to all other kinds of thinking is fundamental and inescapable, for one cannot say anything about it without always already having made assumptions about it as such. Any mode of thought, in short, always already carries an ontology sequestered within it. What this ontology turn does to our other regional modes of thought is to challenge the ontology within which they operate. With ontology at issue, the entire foundation of any mode of thought are rendered problematic. This applies to much of any modern discipline of thought, as it does to the question of modernity as such. Whatever ontology you subscribe to, knowingly and unknowingly, as a human being, you still have to act. Whether or not you know or acknowledge it, the ontology you subscribe to will construe the problem of action for you in one way rather than another. You may think ontology is some arcane question of philosophy, but Nietzsche and Heidegger showed that the intimately shapes not only a way of thinking, but a way of being, a form of life. Political decision, in short, or no mere technique. It is instead a way of being that bears an understanding of being and fundaments of the human way of being within it. This applies the most to those mock innocent political slaves who claim only the technocrats and decision-making. Ontology comes first, knowledge. Ontology determines what does and does not count as an object of knowledge. Critique aims towards rethinking of knowing as a relation between subjects rather than subjects and beings. Dillon, 1996. Human being has politics because it simply is political in the freedom of eleatic truth, where the struggle to be is continuously questioned, and the questioning of which is to be human and takes form of the challenge to grant this existence its due to the world in which realizes its integral being with. Should it seek an end to questioning an inescapable conditional character of its freedom by refusing its responsibility for it, it not only fails to be political, it threatens its own destruction. We demand the abandonment of materialistic practices and institutions that perpetuate the exploitation of human nature, and the creation of an exchange with one another, affording individual rights to all through any and all means necessary. The current system of government negatively implements any form of sovereignty by overpowering the general will and forming administrative action that only acts to control the governed. Rousseau. A will is general, or it is not. It is that of the whole body of the people, only by one faction. In the first instance, putting the will towards words and force is an act of sovereignty. That will become law. In the second instance, it is only a particular will or an administrative action, and the very most it is a decree. Our political theorists, however, are unable to divide the sources of sovereignty, divide sovereignty into the ways it is applied. They divide it into force and will, into legislative power and executive power, into power and tax, judicial power, power to wage, into internal administration, to the power to negotiate with foreign countries. Now we see them running these powers together. Now they will process to separate them. They make the sovereign being a fantasy composed of separate pieces, which would be like putting a man together from several bodies. One having eyes, another arms, another feet, nothing more. Our current system of government cannot successfully influence any form of change because it is still people who live under a suppressed view of how one should govern. Thoreau. No man with a genius for legislation has appeared in America. They are rare in the history of the world. They are orators, politicians, and elegant men by the thousand. But the speaker has not yet opened his mouth to speak who is capable of settling the much vexed question of the day. Our legislators have not yet learned the comparative values of free trade and freedom, or union, or rectitude to a nation. They are no genius or talent for comparatively humble questions of taxation, finance, commerce, and manufactures and agriculture. If we left solely to the wordy wit of legislators in Congress for our guidance, uncorrected by the seasonal experience and the effectual complaints of the people. And the government cannot change until they disengage and learn to adopt the mindset of the individual, free from institutional suppression. There will never be a really free and enlightened state until the state has come to recognize that the individual as a higher and independent power, from which all its own power and authority are derived, to treat him accordingly. I please myself with imagining a state at least which can afford to be all men, and to treat the individual with respect as a neighbor, with which even would not think it inconsistent with its own repose if a few were to live aloof from it, not meddling with it, nor embracing it, who fulfilled all of the duties of neighbors and following them. Government suppresses people from living freely. It makes them conform to its belief or punishes them, which is dehumanizing people and stripping them from their rights to live by their thereof. When I have conversed with the freest of my neighbors, they cannot spare the protection of the existing government, and they dread the consequences. If I deny the authority of the state when I present its tax bill, it will soon take the waste of all my property. It so harasses me and my children without him. This is hard. This makes it impossible for men to live honestly. The United States government operates under a mindset of imperial grand strategy that is harmful to the international community and is doomed to fail. Iconberry 02. In the shadow of the Bush administration war on terrorism, sweeping new ideas are circulating about U.S. grand strategy and the restructuring of today's unipolar world. They call for American unilateral and preemptive, even preventive use of force, facilitated if possible by coalitions of the willing, but ultimately unconstrained by the rules and norms of the international community. These notions form a neo-imperial vision in which the United States arrogates to itself the global role of setting standards, determining threats, using force, and meting at justice. America and the other major states do not need a new consensus on terrorist threats, weapons of mass destruction, the use of force, or global rules of the game. America's nascent neo-imperial grand strategy threatens to run the fabric of the international community and the political partnership precisely at a time when that community of those partnerships are urgently needed. It is an approach fraught with peril and likely to fail. It is not only politically unsustainable, but diplomatically harmful. And if history is a guide, it will trigger autonomous and resistance that will leave America in a more hostile and divided world. Imperial grand strategy allows the government to operate under the idea that they are untouchable by any form of law as long as they perceive a threat. Chomsky 03. The goal of the imperial grand strategy is to prevent any challenge to the war position and prestige of the United States. The quoted words were spoken by Statman Dean Aikson in 1963, justifying U.S. action against Cuba in full knowledge that Washington's imperial terrorist campaign aimed to add regime change had been a significant factor in bringing linked to their case, proven through the U.S. indefinite detention strategies. Force-feeding hunger strikes in Guantanamo Bay is Valcott 13. Force-feeding hunger strikes in Guantanamo Bay is against the international medical standards and should be stopped. The human rights experts warn that the indefinite detention constitutes cruel, inhumane, and degrading treatment and should end. According to the World Medical Assembly Declaration of Malta, in cases involving people on hunger strike, the duty of medical personnel is to act ethically and principle of respect for individuals' autonomy, among other principles, must be respected. Advantage. While it seems that society has accepted these moral standards, it is only because the influence of the people who run and operate the institutions and operate our society. Elias, 1997. Thus, while we should be concerned with the we of the general public, we should even more be interested in the we of the powerful few people and institutions who run our society, undoubtedly more for their own interest than ours. So let us consider the American people, but also the American state, those elites both in and out of government who really rule our nation. The violence of the government. Advantage to peaceful reconstruction. In order to live in our own liberties, we must act through civil disobedience, which is a moral obligation of citizens in order to promote peaceful changes in their society. Keene, 1965. We acknowledge that the law is present social order and not seamless garment of right, but must be judged and altered to the light of moral standards external to the law. We reduce the present disparity between our ideas and our actual condition. We should once again draw upon our tradition to the sun.
So, what's your alternative? I know you read it.
Did you read your alternative?
To your dissent, or to your off case.
No, we did not read the alternative.
So, what's your alternative?
Our alternative.
So, okay, yeah.
Do you have an alternative?
We'll get to it in the 2 months.
Okay. So your boycott 13 evidence saying that we link to this idea of like civil disengagement or like to imperial grand strategy. It's like proven through indefinite detention. You understand we're reducing indefinite detention, right? we're actually limiting what the president can do with indefinite detention.
But you're reducing it through government.
But we're reducing their, would you say we're reducing it though, right? We're limiting their imperial abilities, if you would put it that way, to indefinitely detain?
No, not
We're not limiting indefinite detention.
No.
You still have,
That's our plan text though.
but you still have definite detention present.
Right, but your link is saying it's proven to indefinite detention strategies. If we're reducing the amount of indefinite detention we can do, wouldn't that also undermine some of that link?
Even if you reduce something doesn't mean you're helping it.
So can you explain some of this, like your Thoreau, like government can't influence any form of change, like people are just suppressed? Can you explain that?
It's just saying that governments know to abuse their power, not to run things to their optimal performance, and just that we should drop government as a whole and walk away from it.
Okay, when was that written? There wasn't a date on the card.
Oh, it's one of the philosophical. Yeah, it's a philosophical card.
Does it have a date?
No date.
Which card did you read on violence?
I read the first card on violence by Elias, 1997.
And on your second advantage?
The Keaton, 1965. Yeah, Keaton, 1965.
Okay. So how come, can you explain in your own words why ontology comes first? Like over, say, extinction?
Well, if you want to make a policy, you can't. If you just go into making a policy, then you don't put thought into it first. You need to go and put thought into your actions before making it, so that you don't make a wrongful decision. And
So you're saying that we made our plan without thinking about it?
I'm saying that you should put more thought into it before deciding on a plan.
What's the threshold for thinking about a plan?
Knowing the reactions and knowing what will happen if it's put to action.
All right. Group up.